8 years ago, the idea of creating a festival that bridges the gap between art and science through film might have seemed a bit futuristic. Well, today, the Imagine Science Film Festival is very much a reality, and the goal of creating dialogue between scientists and filmmakers is no longer theoretical. Beginning last Friday and for the rest of this week, there are screenings at a variety of locations throughout the city. BRIC is a proud partner in this year's effort, and there's a screening of BRIC flicks tomorrow night, and on Saturday, we're hosting the festival's awards night. Well, we're going to find out right now about it from our guest in a moment. But first, here's an Imagine Science trailer. I had a puberty moment for a minute.
On the ground, you can only hide if you are able to imagine the view of yourself as seen from above.
That was so exciting. Let's welcome to BK Live Imagine Science Film Festival's Executive Director, Alexis Gambis, who holds a PhD in molecular biology and genetics and recently earned a graduate degree from NYU's Tisch Film Program. Also with us is Nate Dorr, who is the festival's program director. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're so happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been 8 years. How did you conceive of this? We know you use both sides of your brain. You went to film school and you're a geneticist, so
yeah,
8 years later.
I did a PhD at Rockefeller University, which is in the Upper East Side, and they had a small film series that they had on Monday nights at Rockefeller. And I decided to take over that film series when I was a graduate student in my third year, and I said, oh, wouldn't it be a great idea to start showing science films to the actual scientific community? And then I was a bit frustrated also by what a science film was, because people, when they say science films, they think of Discovery Channel, or they think science fiction, but there's this whole gray zone in between about experimental films, about what it is to be a graduate student, a PhD student, working on nematodes, or working on fungi, or working on fruit.
Day in the life.
Day in the life of a young scientist, especially, because every time you see a scientist on screen, it's like a lab coat,
gray-haired guy,
gray-haired beakers, and then I was like, well, you know, I was in my.
And you are all like that most of the time.
I'm like that. When I slip out of Brooklyn, I put on my lab coat, and I'm like that. But so that's how it started, and it was initially a film series, and then in 2008, a bunch of scientists, not only me, but other scientists were like, well, let's start a film festival. We have no film backgrounds. And so we pitched it to different places in New York. Everybody laughed at us because we said, we have no films, but we want to start this. And then, you know, we had a few sponsors, Nature magazine, which is a big science magazine that came on board. And then we just kind of went around the city and said, let's start a festival which is kind of represented by who we are as young scientists, and that's how it started.
Excellent. Wait, but this is the first year in New York.
No, that was in 2008. That was 8 years ago. Yeah. So we've been having it annual ever since, and it's been growing, and we kind of go around the city. So we go on for 9 days now, and we're in 15 different venues. We start at Google, which was on Friday night, and we're very excited. BRIC has two of our nights.
Yep.
Tomorrow night on the Stoop, and then we have our award ceremony and closing night here on Saturday. And we're Brooklyn babies, me and Nate. The festival is based here in Brooklyn. We were on Flatbush, and now we're in Dumbo. And you know, that's where our heart is. And so that's, you know, but the festival is a traveling festival, and it's very much kind of scientists, artists, filmmakers, very young crowd.
I want to know what would you consider a science movie that we may all know that we may not even know is a science movie?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, most science movies we all know are things like, I don't know, Interstellar, which is sort of a science movie, but it's a science fiction. Or it's things like, Nova and classic documentaries, which are also great. But we're sort of more interested in the in-between areas. A really good example, let's see, what's something that everyone would know? Well, right now, actually playing at Film Forum, many people may have gone to see The Creeping Garden, which is a movie about slime moles, which, if we're talking about things that are in between, they're in between everything. For years, they didn't know what category to put them in, whether they were a fungus or an animal or something else. I think they're more of a bacteria now.
Really?
So
Yes.
this is a movie where you get the big popcorn to watch about.
Yes.
This is like the slime mold having like an
molds. identity
crisis. Like we don't know what they are. And
Does it eat Cleveland, or is it just specifically
That's
around
a secret.
There's
Florida?
these
That's
clips
the same,
from old films or old television where they didn't know what was happening. It's this thing invading. But anyway, this film is also between everything. It's sort of about artists and scientists trying to deal with this strange organism, and that we showed last year at the festival, and now it's kind of everywhere. So
Amazing.
that's an example.
Nate, the trailer that we just saw are some clips of the films that are going to be here at BRIC, right?
Yes.
You put that together. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's a program called Observer Effects, which in science, the observer effect is the fact that when you look at something, you change it. There's no observation where the subject is totally free from that. And that also sort of relates to, in quantum physics, the moment you look at a particle, it changes its state. It's sort of in an indefinite state until you look at it. So these films are about looking and being an observer, both in art and science, and how film is sort of built around the camera being an eye. So it's all of these themes about looking, and yeah, it all comes together.
We're seeing some stills from some of the things that we're going to see tomorrow night on the Stoop here. But when you said that looking, there are so many intersections there between art and science and media where those things merge. So, of course, it seems natural now, but it just took me that instant before, okay, this is synthesizing in my brain right now, but you guys see this as a natural fit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is, a lot of the making of films is obviously scientific based, and a lot of the early films, actually, the history of cinema started with scientific experiments. You know, there was a very famous film that was made in the early 1900s, which was The Acrobatic Fly. A lot of surrealism was all about taking animals. So it's in a way kind of coming back to that, and I think people are genuinely excited about science. They're intimidated by it in many ways, but even in Brooklyn, there's this event called the Secret Science Club, which happens at the Bell House.
They're awesome lectures.
Yeah, and it's no longer very secret. There's like thousands of people that wait in line for that, and I think people are excited about it, and it's really just kind of bridging the lab, which used to be a place where people used to smoke and walk. Now it's become very sterile environment. But so you know, I think it's a natural fit, and there was an article that came out in Motherboard and in Vice recently, which is a great representation. The title is called "What is the science film anyway?" A science film is a film, and it shouldn't actually, you know, that's kind of the goal of it, is to treat it as any other type of film.
So who's the audience, Nate, then? Who do you expect on the Stoop? Is it going to be like Neil Tyson deGrasse,
he's
live tweeting and his stuff? And he's always like ripping every movie. Your hair would never do that in space.
He was with the popcorn on Google Night a year ago, but he's been a big fan,
Yeah, well, last year I think we kind of polled the audience, and at one of the screenings this question came up during a Q&A, and I think it was something like a third artists, a third scientists, and a third just other people who came in. So that's about right.
That's great.
It's all over. Yeah.
Sounds like Brooklyn.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Nate, we didn't get your background. How did you come to this?
Sort of similarly, I worked in an animal behavior lab for 8 years, which was up at Mount Sinai, but basically your classic, you know, rats and mice running in mazes kinds of stuff. But if you live in New York and you only do one thing, you're not really taking full advantage. So I was also a photographer and a lot of other things, and gradually I had a resume that didn't make sense for anything except a science film festival. So I found my way here.
I love it. So have either of you ever made your own film, or do you just
Yeah,
work on the festival?
I'm a filmmaker now, so I
Okay, so
I
now.
actually shot my first feature called The Fly Room, which is about a lab in the 1920s. And it's about it's kind of like a Pan's Labyrinth type of feel. It's about a little girl that spends a day with her father in an insect lab and starts confusing her father with insects. And this lab is a very famous lab at Columbia, which is the birthplace of modern genetics, where they discovered the gene. So I try to make a living as a filmmaker, and I also teach at NYU. I teach part of the year also in NYU in Abu Dhabi. They have a campus in the Middle East, and manage Imagine Science. But I guess I'm somewhat of a retired scientist. I no longer do science.
Yeah, whatever buys the film.
Exactly.
It's all
digital.
film now. Nate, do you still dabble? Are you still
yeah, well-
sometimes in a research lab, sometimes behind the camera?
Well, mostly I don't go. It's hard to dabble in research science.
I'm
So
just gonna
less
come back
that.
into this
Just gonna
a little
stop
bit.
by the lab. I'll be back.
You know what I want to find out about? Just let me in.
Well, they call me back once in a while when equipment doesn't work or something. They're like, "Do you remember how to use this?" So then once in a while. But no, occasionally we make our own films for Imagine Science rather than just curating other people's. We have a series on the website called Imagine Science Spotlight, and that started off with just me running into labs with a camera and filming whatever I could for a while. So,
Guerrilla
and that's still going on now,
Yeah.
mostly with other people, but I still film.
We want to start our own lab actually at Imagine Science, which would be kind of a film lab / research lab.
Wired for sound and cameras.
Exactly, wired for sound cameras with microscopes and do experiments. That is kind of a dream that we have in the future, is to have our own kind of mini lab that would be separate from a university. So.
I love it. Okay, so once again, when are the programs happening here, and how can people get
Sell some
tickets and find
Sell
out?
some tickets right now.
Well, Observer Effects, which you saw the trailer for, will be playing right out here on the stoop tomorrow night at 7. And then we'll be back on Saturday for our closing night awards ceremony and ambient science. So some films, we'll have some edible smog for people to taste.
It's gonna
you
get
have to be
wild,
there.
right?
I mean, we're running all week. Tonight we're at the Anthology Film Archives with this kind of
My
like
neighborhood.
cycle. Yeah, it's an amazing film called Strange Eyes of Dr. Mize. We're at the Museum of the Moving Image with this kind of science, kind of surrealist film, kind of Kubrick type film called Cosmodrama, a French film. Friday night we have a retrospective of old films that were made in the early 1900s by Jean Parlevet, who made a series called Science is Fiction, and these are kind of old films.
Yeah.
So we have things going on all week. 135 movies over the 9 days.
Well, don't miss that party. Ain't no party like a science party.
You have to
Yeah.
come. Please
It's
be there.
Saturday
Yeah.
when you get to eat some smog.
Edible smog. Yeah.
Where else? Yeah.
Well, we look forward to seeing you on the stoop tomorrow at 7 and Saturday
o'clock,
back in
please.
the Brick House. Find yourself here. It'll be enlightening.
Yeah, please come and come to the festival and enjoy it. And most of the events are practically free or very, that's kind of the idea, is to get as many different people to come. So
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
thank you so much for having
Thank
us.
you.